My topic this afternoon is changing behaviour. The first slide, as you can see, is a jigsaw puzzle. And those of you that were at the workshop yesterday heard Sarah talking about how we piece together behaviour and where behaviour comes from. And it's not just one thing. There are many pieces, and the more pieces that we have in the right place, the clearer the picture. So, how do we turn this into this? Now, those of you that have worked with Bassets might say that's an impossible mission. Don't worry, no Bassets were harm trainers. I disagree. I think all dogs have the opportunity to change their behaviour. It's just how we approach it. So we have to understand where the behaviour is coming from. So, we are motivated to change behaviour because there's an undesirable behaviour taking place. That's our motivation to change that behaviour. But we have to really look at the word undesirable. Who's it undesirable and why is it undesirable? It's from our perspective. It doesn't say unnatural. It's an unnatural behaviour. Often it is a natural behaviour. And from the dog's point of view, it's often not even an unreasonable behaviour. But it's just something that we wouldn't like to happen. And that could be through our house rules, it could be through our culture, through our social, but we have to consider where these behaviours come from. We have to identify whether it's a learned behaviour or a natural behaviour. And one of the big things that we teach our dogs to do, and actually I was doing it slightly inadvertently yesterday, was jumping up. So we teach them to do it all the time, especially when they're very little. Now, of course, some of these little dogs get very big. You'll see a picture of one of my dogs later, and she's not a small thing by any stretch. So it's quite important for me for her not to be jumping up. So is it a learned behaviour or is it a natural behaviour? And a natural behaviour that is just sort of out of context, just inappropriate for our life. Now, this poor chap's just trying to bury his bone. But obviously this is in a car park, probably in a supermarket, where somebody's put some lovely flowers in there. But from his point of view, he's just saying, I need somewhere to bury my bone. So what stage? If it's a learned behaviour, we have to try and think about what stage of learning the behaviour is. And it's really important because if it's classically conditioned, we know if it's an automatic response, the dog reacts to the situation, the environment, what's in front of the dog at that particular time, then it's an automatic response. The dog isn't thinking it through, it's just going, boom, react to the situation. But if it's in the instrumental learning stage, this sort of trial and error stage where the dog is trying out new behaviours, trying to come up with a behaviour that is suitable for the situation, then potentially we are in an easier spot to try and modify that behaviour, because we just need to give them a behaviour that we would like them to do at the right time. So, but being aware of this is incredibly important, because it will affect the way we modify that dog's behaviour. So when we are teaching our dogs, and we've been very lucky to see some fabulous dogs here in the last couple of days, and yesterday and this morning we were teaching these little puppies to sit in a very stressful situation, but they were doing excellent, really well. But I guarantee if we brought those puppies back tomorrow, and I'd love to, but we can't, that they would just do a little bit better, and they'd be a bit more used to the environment, used to the situation, and they'd already started to practice that behaviour. So the more you practice the behaviour, and you're teaching your dog new tricks all the time, and the more you practice, the better they get at it. I didn't do this, by the way. That wasn't me teaching a dog to balance. I don't know. I think it's either Photoshop or they're glued together, possibly. I don't know. But practice makes perfect. But on the downside of that, when we think of behaviour that we don't want, undesirable behaviour also gets stronger with practice. So as part of the way I look at changing behaviour in dogs is to look at the behaviour that they're showing, the context that they're showing it in, and try and reduce that practice of negative behaviour, which I appreciate is not always easy, particularly in a shelter environment where there's a lot of stress, a lot of movement, and sometimes limited facilities. So I've got a little video which is a really common behaviour that's seen in our shelters, and this was taken at one of Dogs Trust, one of the older centres at Dogs Trust, and I was just literally walking past with a little camera, and very common, see it all the time. So what happens from a learning point of view, that dog sees somebody approach the kennel, comes out barking, obviously fearful, worried about my presence there. What do? I walk away, the behaviour is successful, it continues, it increases, and every now and again somebody will try harder than I did, and they'll sit there, they'll stand there, and they'll wait and wait and wait. One of two things will happen. The behaviour will intensify and she'll become more aggressive. She might need to show her teeth, she might need to bash against the bars, or eventually she might just suppress that aggressive behaviour. Neither is a good end result. So how do we combat this? And it's a tricky one, because we need visitors, we need people to come to our shelters, we need them to see our dogs, because it's hard, for the want of a better word, sell our dogs to the public when they can't see them. But every day, and some shelters are incredibly busy, hundreds of people walking through the door every week. Imagine how much practice this collie gets at this behaviour. It soon becomes very solid, very conditioned, and very difficult to eradicate. But what you can do, you can give them options. There are things that we've done in our shelters, including you can move the dog to a quieter kennel. That can help if it's available. You can give the dog somewhere to hide within the kennel, indoor crates, even just a sofa or a chair to hide behind, just somewhere where they can feel a little bit safer. Or you can actually add some sort of barrier on the outside of the kennel, just so people aren't quite so close. If the stage is the front of the kennel, maybe the dog isn't going to be as intensely fearful if I'm this far away, or maybe even better this far away. So having a barrier of some description, and it doesn't have to be red tape and no entry and all, keep away from this dog, it's going to eat you. It's not really how we want to sell dogs, is it? But what we can do is just put some pot plants or something that will enhance the look of the kennel, but keep them just a little bit away from the front of the kennel. It just gives the dog that little bit of space and reduces the intensity, even if it doesn't stop the dog doing the behaviour. Reducing the intensity, if that's all you've got available, then that's what you try and do. So we try and remove the stressful or the frightening stimuli. It's difficult. But if the dog is exposed to these things on a daily basis, it's soon going to become a very conditioned response and much, much trickier to overcome. So our aims, what do we aim to do when we think about changing behaviour? My first approach is to try and avoid the situation. Stop the unwanted behaviour being practised. But it can't just be left at that. I have been criticised in the past as a positive dog trainer, because people insisted, all you positive dog trainers, all you do is just avoid the situation, remove the dog from the situation, And there are some trainers that will do that. So it's really important that we don't just leave it there. We need to get the dog to a point where he will have a new response to the behaviour. But there is a way of doing it. And it's about having time, having an understanding from the behaviour where the behaviour is coming from. So we do need to try and teach another response. Or you can do both at the same time. This chap hasn't got muddy paw prints all over his nice new suit, but he's still teaching the dog another response. Whether this would have the same effect with the first slide we saw of the dog jumping up, I don't think it would be the same thing. So we can avoid initially, teach the dog a new behaviour, rather than just ignoring it or punishing it. The amount of times people have told me that the easiest way to stop a dog jumping up is to knee it in the chest, probably would work. But we've already heard today about building relationships, building trust, you know, and how much trust are you going to have? If you walk up to somebody today and go to shake their hand and they slap you in the face, it's not going to build trust, and you're less likely to approach them and shake their hand, which maybe is the thing that they're after. But there are other ways of achieving that. If we're dealing with a natural behaviour, for me it's about understanding that natural behaviour, knowing that it is, you know, it's coming from the dog's pathology, you know, it's something that the dog desires to do. So just stopping the dog doing it could be very detrimental to the dog's welfare. Now, digging is a common one, and many dogs, certainly in shelters, don't always get the opportunity to dig. Often dogs in homes do, and again it's deemed as an inappropriate behaviour. But again, it's something that can be so simply solved by providing an outlet for that behaviour. So thinking about breeds and what breed traits and breed preferences are is important, because there are certainly certain types of dog that will dig more. We'll see in a moment, this bottom right here, your bottom right, like to swim. I have one of these, and she certainly likes to swim. Given the opportunity, she would swim in a puddle in the rain, you know, she would just, any water she loves to swim. But maybe the greyhound doesn't like to swim. But maybe the greyhound does like to run and chase small fluffy things. So we have to be aware of the breeds. We know they're dogs. We know what their overall natural behaviour is. We have to consider breeds as well. I was actually out in Malta this year, very fortunate to go out there, beautiful country, and very hot, 34 degrees I think it was. So, yeah, 34 degrees, something I'm not used to, coming from the UK. And they were telling me that one of their favourite breeds in Malta at the moment is a husky. Yeah, that's pretty much what I did. I went, oh, dear me. It's got to be tough being a husky in 34 degrees. It's certainly tough being a Newfoundland cross in, what are we lucky for in the UK, 18 degrees. My girl finds it hard at that. So how do they get around it? Well, not everybody's going to leave a shell free in their fridge for their husky, that's for sure. But they will try and find a way, because it's not just a breed preference, it's a need. It's not just a desire. You're keeping your body temperature at the right level. It's important. There are a few people that have said it's a little bit chilly in here. You might not be as comfortable as you would be. Or if it's really hot, trying to concentrate, trying to take in information when you're feeling uncomfortable, when you're feeling too cold, too hot, whether you need a toilet. These are all considerations when we're thinking about modifying behaviour in dogs. You can say "oh" if you like. Thank you for humouring me. Isn't she beautiful? This is my Molly. Molly is a Newfoundland cross something. She's 55-ish kilos of hairy mud magnet. And I had a problem, an undesirable behaviour with Molly in the summer. And when I came back from a walk with her, she would come straight into the kitchen, pick up this large bowl of water, throw it all over the kitchen, lie in it and roll around. From her point of view, it was the obvious thing to do. How do I cool down? There's some water, put it on the floor. Actually, very bright of her, I thought. My wife wasn't so keen. And when the kids were coming in armbands and flippers and goggles for their lunch, we had to do something else. But what I didn't do, I didn't take the water bowl up. I didn't go, well, that's the easiest way to solve that. Take the water bowl up and there she falls, she can't throw it all over the kitchen. I tried a couple of different things, but what really worked for her was a cold, wet beach towel in the sink before I went out for a walk. When I came back, took it out of the sink, put it on the floor, and she laid on that and cooled herself down. So it's actually quite a simple thing to do. But how many times have we heard, whether it be it on the TV or from maybe other trainers, that if you have a problem with house training, if the dog is peeing everywhere, remove its water bowl. Is that really the problem? No, I would imagine it's not. So it's about knowing, and knowing where the behaviour is coming from, and thinking slightly differently, rather than just stopping behaviour all the time. It's not always about stopping behaviour. Often it's about just adapting it, changing it slightly. To suit both of us, we have to live together. We do have to live together now, because I've had her for over 2 years. I was only going to have her for 2 weeks, but no, that happens, as Liz was saying earlier. 2 weeks, and yeah, she'll be okay to be rehomed. Anywho. So, understand where the behaviour comes from. We know dogs have emotions. We know dogs suffer from fear, but they also have excitement and frustration. So if the behaviour is fear-based, we've got to understand what the dog is fearful of, where that behaviour is coming from, and not just say, oh, it just needs to face its fears. And unfortunately, it happens all too often, and it's called flooding, and it's awful to watch. I've seen a number of videos of dogs being flooded, and it's pretty horrific. If you just put the dog into a situation where there is no escape, and you just keep adding more and more pressure to them, at the very best you'll get shut down behaviour, and the dog will shut down, stop reacting. Often that's where the trainer will say, there we go, I fixed your dog. He's no longer lunging, or biting, or barking, or snarling, or growling. He's quiet. But it's not a way to solve fear. If it's frustration, and frustration is something that we deal with constantly in shelters, dogs are in cages, in kennels, for long periods of the day. So frustration is a common problem we have. And through frustration, we get redirection and aggression. So we have to be aware that dogs have certain needs. And again, we can think about individuals rather than all dogs. I have a lurcher who lives with my Newfoundland. He is the laziest dog in the world. It's fabulous. It suits my lifestyle completely. But he lies on the sofa. He goes out for a 20-minute dash around the field, comes back and falls asleep. So not a huge frustration from him. But if I had an 8-month-old collie, that I just expected to have a 20-minute run around the field, would that be enough? Potentially not. So within our shelters, we have to identify individuals and cater for their needs. And sometimes that might be to the sacrifice of another dog. But if you're dealing with large numbers, you're not going to be able to do everything. You're not going to be able to fix every dog or cater for every dog's needs. It could be excitement. And excitement can just be, they just haven't been taught anything else. They just jump on you, bite you, grab you, bowl you over, trip you over, steal things, just through excitement. It could be a resource issue, and many of you are dealing with dogs coming into your shelters that have had very limited resources, very limited food, very limited opportunity for positive social interaction. So, resources are obviously a huge issue within our shelters. Or our old adversary, the stress. Stress is obviously it's a big part of living in a shelter. Shelter life is stressful. We are aware of that, but there are things that we can do to help. There are ways we can reduce stress, and that can be to do with numbers that you have in your shelters. It can be exercise through volunteers or staff. It can be through training. It can be through your management, environmental enrichment, which we'll be talking about tomorrow. There are a number of ways that we can help with stress. Sorry, something's going to happen now. Okay, so when we're training dogs, and we need to change their behaviour, one thing we definitely need from the dog is some focus. When Karen was working with a puppy this morning, and when we were doing the workshop yesterday, it's so important to have the focus. The dog is paying attention to you, and even this little chat was, little girl. Doesn't really matter. Little girl, thank you. She was up here and she was paying attention, but she looked over it. Yeah, okay, well, you're all okay. She was coping with it, but she was focused on Carolyn, knew what she was doing and enjoying it. So having that focus is so important. So if you're taking dogs out of a shelter and they're bouncing on your head and, and pulling you all over the place, or screaming, this little chap is called Squeak, and if there's sound you will understand why. Not a lot of focus there. Very difficult to teach a dog in that state of mind anything at all. What some trainers will resort to in those situations is punishment, because they feel the dog is just not available for interaction, which actually is true. The dog isn't available to interaction. When I'm teaching a dog like this to get some focus, it needs to be done in an environment that the dog can cope with. So we wouldn't be doing it outside. The next video is a week later. It's not ideal, we're not quite there yet when we shot the video, but actually the dog is now in a home and doing really well. But we did introduce the target stick, and for those of you who were in the workshop yesterday, we saw a little bit of target work on video. But I just have a look at him, and I haven't turned the volume off. As you can hear the wind. Oops, amazing. He's still agitated, he's still quite excited. But he's checking in, he's coming back. It's the early stages of him providing some focus and then being able to learn something. Once we got him a little bit calmer, then actually we could introduce him to other dogs again, things that excited him. Early stages, but he did really well. We had to change his name because he didn't squeak anymore, which was great. With a lot of dogs, because as we said earlier, with regards to the way dogs learn, if they're in the instrumental learning stage, if they're trying new behaviours, they'll be trying different things to deal with the situation. So if a dog is fearful, worried by something, whether it's a person, whether it's another dog, whether it's cars, traffic, whatever it may be, they'll often adapt a strategy. Some will avoid, which may mean running off, or just hiding behind you. Others will lunge out. So often what I try and do is look at that behaviour, look at what they're already doing and see if it will work for me. So we do two main strategies. We teach a watch me, so for those dogs that are lunging out, very forward thinking, going out towards the thing that is frightening them, or stressing them out, I don't want them behind me. Because if I have somebody here that they're worried about, and they're likely to lunge out at them, and I put them here, who's in the way? Me. It's not a good place to be. So what I will do is I will teach the dog to watch me in the presence of the thing that is scary, but at distance. We set them up to succeed. So we can either teach a watch me, which is just look at me, even though that scary person is over there, watch me, get rewarded. Or if the dog has an already avoidance strategy in place, then teach them to hide. Now you can do that with a target, you can target the hand, or you can have a target stick, or you can just target them to the side of the body or to behind you. The idea being is that they already adopted that strategy, you're just putting it on command, so when you see a scary thing, they come the other side. It keeps the dog safe from that person that just can't help themselves and go and pat them on the head, which they just can't cope with it. But also it just, it stops out the dog trying other strategies. You've given it a solid strategy that works for you and for the dog. So this is a video of a colleague at one of our centres that when I first met her, she was less than friendly with me. She lunged out, she was snarling and biting, trying to bite. Very fearful, very, very worried girl. 2 weeks of work and I came back and actually Wilma, there she is, was with me at the time. So there was two strangers, two lovely looking people stood by side. And this is the response that we got. There is a moment where she almost decides to have a bit of a go. No, there, but she manages it. She wasn't too far away. We didn't start at this distance. We started at 20, 30 feet, I think it was, teaching the behaviour of watch me means look at me. And if you look at me, you get a treat. So when we're teaching dogs this, we do it without the thing that frightens them in place first. We get the behaviour as solid as we can, and then we introduce the thing that makes them frightened or stressed or worried. And we do it gradually. I say gradually, but this is, like I said, this is 2 weeks of work, and I really do wish I'd got the original video of her lunging and snarling, and my camera was probably a bit like that, running away from them, because she was quite worried by me. So it's a very simple technique. It's something you can teach staff, volunteers, anybody can do it, and with consistency it's so useful. We need to use appropriate rewards, high or low value. We touched on this yesterday at the workshop. If we're going to use high value rewards, we're going to make sure that it's not too exciting. Some of the dogs, when they get too excited, again, that adrenaline's really high, they want the tasty treat, and it's harder for them to learn. So it has to be appropriate for the dog. So sometimes it's just their normal kibble, normal dry food. Sometimes it's something more exciting. Maybe it's a toy. Maybe it's just a smile and a, there's a good dog. And actually I do that all the time. I try to do that all the time. I don't know if I was doing it yesterday because I wasn't conscious of it. But when I'm working with a dog, I try and smile. I try and look as comfortable and as happy as possible, because we know dogs react to our reactions and our body posture and our facial expressions. And there's been work done on that. So be happy with your dogs. It's so important. Giving the dog a reliable predictor will increase and enhance your training so much. So using the clicker, we've done a fair bit of clicker in these last couple of days, but when you get that clicker out the next time and the dog goes, oh, I know what that is. They normally put the bum on the floor to start with. And you couldn't remove the little puppy from the bum. Come, get up. No, you've got the clicker, I'm going to sit here. And it becomes such a good predictor. So it's not just, oh, I know what to do, but yes, I know what to do, and I know it's going to be a good thing. So it's giving a reliable predictor, or using a bum bag, or actually using both together, having the bum bag, I don't know if that translates to various languages. A treat bag, that's a better word, I think. A treat bag with the clicker and the treats in it. So you put the treat bag on, and you get the clicker out, and then you do the training. And the first time the dog goes, okay, well that was good. The second time, you've hardly got the treat bag on, and they go, I'm sitting, because they want to do it. It's so important. It teaches them when to pay attention, but also when to relax. And that is important too, because dogs that can't relax because they want to, I want to do more, they get frustration, and then you get more redirection, and you can get annoyed with them because they won't leave you alone. So having something that gives a clear signal that it's time to chill out is so important. I'm going to do this. No. Making goals achievable is so important. I set myself a task, and I haven't really told many people this, to learn to juggle. Okay? 2 weeks ago, I said I'm going to learn to juggle. I'm going to teach myself to juggle. Oh, I will. I'll give it a try. I'm now in front of 240 people. 2 weeks ago, I started to learn to juggle. If you remember nothing else today, remember this. Don't start clapping too soon, it puts me on. Okay, you can start clapping now. Was that a realistic goal? Well, actually, yes it was, because I managed it. But it's so stressful. You cannot believe the amount of stress that I have been under before coming up here. Talking about dog behaviour, that's easy stuff. But having a difficult thing to do and making it difficult for yourself, it's hard to do. So when we do that with our dogs, and we put them under a lot of pressure, and we can make it too hard for them, they are unlikely to succeed. So we have to make their goals achievable, and that's different for every single dog. Every single dog is different. Some dogs, and we saw it this morning, the little one was up here going, yeah, I can see it, this is great. I don't care about them. What about the slightly older one, the slightly bigger one? She struggled a bit. So Caroline did exactly the right thing. She adapted the training and just rewarded for the dog coming towards her. And that's what we have to do. And if we can do that and we can make those goals achievable, then of course they will succeed. I've talked about learning steps in the past. This is all to do with how dogs learn, what they learn, and the environment and their emotion attached with learning. And if we can make it positive, the very simple stuff, over and over and over again, when you get to the difficult stuff, it's not so difficult, because they want to do it. I'm going to run over here. So, easy wins, better than expected reward, get them wanting to work with you. And this, for me, is the whole point. Quick couple of videos. This is just a little touch acceptance program that we do with many dogs that struggle with being handled, struggle with being touched. We put a little mat out, so you can see the little mat which is sat on. We put that out and we teach the dog to be touched and get reinforced for being touched in a gentle way. What I want you to look out for is the point where she goes, touch me again. I'm not going to leave. Come on, Sadie. There you go. Bear in mind, this dog had bitten a couple of hands previously. There we go. That's what you're looking for. Do it again. Touch me, please. If you can get that from your dog, then you are so on the right track. There's another little couple of videos to show the same thing. Round robin recalls, it's something we use to promote positive approach work. So this is Lily's first experience of the game. She's very worried, her head carriage is low, she shows appeasement behaviours, a paw lift, the tail is wagging but very slowly, and her approach is very, very worried. So this is the first time she's done the training. She's sort of managing it, but there's a lot of anxiety there, a lot of worry. And these are people that she knows, these aren't complete strangers. These are staff working on a cold January morning by the looks of it. Well, that's fine. But 1 week on, and this is maybe 3 or 4 presentations of this training, what I want you to see is that's this little bounce, this little enthusiasm. Woo! And we'll see it again. Woo! That's it, it's that way, let's go. And it's the difference, it's subtle. If you're not paying attention, it can be really subtle, but it means so much because the dog wants to do it. So, quick recap. Is it a learned or a natural behaviour? It's important that you identify which one it is. At what stage of learning they're at? Start the avoidance, but also teach a new behaviour. Provide an outlet for the natural behaviours if you can. It's not always easy, but it really does help. Look at the breed, but also look at individual preferences. They are all individuals. What emotion drives that behaviour? Is it fear? Is it frustration? Is it stress? Get some focus, and that's so important when you're trying to teach a dog anything at all. Look at their behaviour preference and use it to your advantage if you can. Use the appropriate rewards, make that training predictable so they start to look forward to what you're going to do with them, and then make their goals achievable. Get them wanting to do it. If you can get them wanting to do it, then it's easy. Give the doctors the tools to continue, support them if you can. Whether it's telephone, whether it's internet, email, Facebook, try and support them. It's all very well, you're doing the work, but if you just put them out there and say, fingers crossed, hope for the best. If you can give them that support, let them see the training that you've done with the dog, then it will be more successful. The dog is likely to stay in the home. How many pieces? Who knows? It varies. Some dogs 2 pieces, some dogs 20 pieces. But it's about identifying how many pieces you need to put together to get the dog in a state of well-being and happiness. Mission Impossible? I don't think so. And the reason why I don't think so is because just these are a selection of dogs that I've worked with. All but one had severe aggression issues. I'm not going to ask you to pick which one didn't have the aggression issues. But she did chew off her own tail. Seriously, pretty bad. But all of them had severe issues. I worked with them, and I put these pictures up on here, not to pat myself on the back, but actually just to make myself think, yeah, it's worth it. It is so worth it. So yeah, there's just a selection of the few that I've worked with. Thank you very much.